You have faced hard times in life. Maybe you've been hurt, doubted, or told you're not good enough. Maybe you feel stuck, like you can't break free from your past or your fears. But what if you had the power to push past pain, overcome any challenge, and become stronger than ever? This book will help you do that. It tells the true story of someone who faced terrible struggles, poverty, abuse, racism, and failure, but refused to give up. He pushed himself beyond limits and turned his pain into strength. His story shows that you can do the same. You should listen to this book because it will teach you how to control your mind, break through your fears, and become the toughest version of yourself. It will push you to do things you never thought were possible. No matter where you come from or what you've been through, you can grow, succeed, and become unstoppable. Chapter 1. I should have been a statistic. I was not supposed to succeed. The world expected me to fail. Born into a life of pain, fear, and struggle, I had every reason to give up. But something inside me refused to break. My childhood was filled with chaos. I lived in a small town, surrounded by violence, abuse, and deep poverty. My father was a cruel man, ruling our home with fear. He beat my mother, controlled our family, and made me feel worthless. No one protected me. No one saved me. I learned early that life was unfair and painful. At school, things weren't any better. I struggled with learning, felt out of place, and faced racism. Teachers assumed I wasn't smart enough. Other kids mocked me. I couldn't read well, and I started believing what everyone else did, that I would never amount to anything. No one expected me to achieve anything. The statistics said I would end up like so many others, broken, lost, or dead. Fear became a part of me. I was afraid of my father, afraid of failing, afraid of life itself. I walked on eggshells at home, never knowing when the next explosion of violence would come. I watched my mother suffer, powerless to stop it. The anger, the shame, and the pain built up inside me, but I had no way to let it out. I buried it deep, trying to survive one day at a time. When my mother finally found the strength to leave my father, I thought things would get better. But new struggles came. We moved from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe. I was always the outsider, the new kid, the one no one wanted to talk to. We had little money, barely enough to eat. I ate whatever was cheap, and soon I started gaining weight. By the time I was in my teens, I was overweight, insecure, and completely lost. I had no confidence, no future, and no hope. I hated what I saw in the mirror. I hated how weak I felt. I saw other kids playing sports, having fun, living normal lives. That wasn't me. I was stuck in survival mode, just trying to make it through the day. I could have given up. I could have become another tragic story, just another statistic. But something inside me refused to quit. I didn't know it yet, but the pain, the fear, and the struggle were shaping me into someone stronger. The world counted me out, but I was about to prove them wrong. Chapter 2. Truth Hurts. I had spent my whole life running from the truth. I made excuses for why I was overweight, why I was failing in school, why my life wasn't going anywhere. I blamed my past, my circumstances, and the people who had hurt me. But deep down, I knew the real reason. I was weak. I had let my fear control me. I had settled for less because it was easier than facing the truth. One day, I stood in front of the mirror and really looked at myself. I was nearly 300 pounds, miserable, and going nowhere. I hated what I saw. I wasn't the victim anymore. Now, I was my own worst enemy. No one was stopping me from changing except me. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It was painful, but it was exactly what I needed. The truth hurts, but it also sets you free. I knew I had two choices: keep lying to myself and stay the same, or face the truth and do something about it. For the first time, I chose the hard path. I decided to be honest with myself about my weaknesses, my failures, and my excuses. No more blaming, no more self pity. It was time to take responsibility. I set a goal to become a Navy SEAL. It sounded insane. No one looking at me would have believed I could do it. I was too fat, too slow, and too weak. But I was done living in denial. I had to change everything: my mindset, my body, my habits. At first, it was brutal. I had to lose over 100 pounds in 3 months just to qualify. The workouts were painful, and my body screamed at me to quit. My mind tried to convince me that it was impossible, but I refused to listen. I reminded myself that I had been lying to myself for too long. I wasn't going to let comfort and fear win anymore. Every day I forced myself to push past my limits. When my body wanted to stop, I told myself to keep going. I changed my diet, studied for hours to pass the entrance exam, and trained harder than I ever thought possible. I felt pain, exhaustion, and frustration, but I also felt something new: control. For the first time in my life, I was in charge. Facing the truth about myself hurt more than anything, but it also gave me power. I realized that if I had been the one holding myself back, then I was also the one who could change everything. The truth was painful, but it was also the key to unlocking my potential. And I wasn't going to stop until I proved to myself and the world that I was capable of more than anyone ever imagined. Chapter 3: The Impossible Task. I had set a goal that felt impossible: losing over 100 pounds in 3 months so I could qualify for Navy SEAL training. The numbers didn't add up. It didn't seem humanly possible, but I didn't care. I had already wasted too much time making excuses, blaming my past, and feeling sorry for myself. No one believed I could do it. Even I had doubts. But doubt didn't matter anymore. The only thing that mattered was proving to myself that I had the power to change. The first few days were brutal. I woke up exhausted before the day even started. My body wasn't ready for the punishment I was about to put it through, but I didn't give myself a choice. I forced myself out of bed before sunrise and started running. My lungs burned, my legs ached, and my body begged me to stop. I had never run like this before. Just a few hundred yards felt like torture. I wanted to quit every step of the way, but I kept going. Lifting weights wasn't any better. I had never pushed my body like this. My arms shook, my muscles gave out, and I could barely move the next day. The soreness was unreal. I had been lazy for too long, and now my body was paying for it. But no matter how much it hurt, I knew pain was the price I had to pay. Food became another battle. I had spent years eating whatever I wanted: fast food, junk food, anything that made me feel better in the moment. I had never thought about what I put into my body. Now that had to change. I threw out all the garbage: no more sugar, no more comfort food, no more excuses. Every meal was chicken, vegetables, and rice. It was boring. It sucked. I hated it. But I reminded myself why I was doing it. Every day, I pushed myself harder. When my legs burned, I ran another mile. When my arms shook, I did one more rep. When I wanted to stop, I told myself to keep going. I studied for hours to pass the ASVAB, the military entrance exam, because failing wasn't an option. My entire life had been about survival, but this was different. This was about taking control of my own future. The days dragged on, and there were moments when I thought I couldn't do it. The voice in my head tried to convince me it was impossible, that I wasn't strong enough, that I should quit. But I had listened to that voice for too long. I had already let fear control me for years, and I refused to let it win again. Little by little, the weight started coming off. At first, I barely noticed, but then my clothes got looser. My face looked different in the mirror, my runs got easier, I could lift more weight. I was changing, not just physically, but mentally. I was stronger than I had ever been, not because I was gifted, but because I refused to stop. When I finally stepped on the scale and saw that I had made it, I almost couldn't believe it. The impossible task, the thing that had seemed so far out of reach, was now my reality. I had lost over 100 pounds in 3 months. I had done what no one thought I could do, but I knew this was just the beginning. Losing the weight was one battle. Becoming a Navy SEAL would be a whole new war, and I had no idea what was coming next. Chapter 4: Taking Souls. I thought I was prepared. I had lost the weight, gotten in shape, and was ready for what I believed would be the toughest part: Navy SEAL training. But nothing could have prepared me for the hell that awaited. The real test wasn't just about strength or endurance, it was about something deeper: the power of the mind. From day one, the instructors made it clear they weren't there to teach us how to swim or run faster. They were there to break us. They wanted to see if we had the mental toughness to keep going when everything in our bodies screamed to stop. The first day of training was a wake-up call. I was pushed harder than I had ever been pushed before. The physical pain was overwhelming. Our bodies were pushed to the limit with non-stop physical exercises. We were barely given any rest. But the real challenge wasn't the pain. It was the exhaustion. We were kept awake for days. The instructors would yell at us, making us run, swim, and do push-ups until we couldn't lift our arms anymore. I remember one moment when I was so exhausted I could barely stand. My body was giving out, and my mind was screaming at me to stop. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about breaking my spirit. The instructors weren't trying to make us quit. They were trying to take our souls. They wanted to see if we would give in, if we would let our fear and our pain control us. But I wasn't about to let that happen. Every time they pushed me to the edge, I pushed back. When I felt like my body was going to fail, I told myself to keep going. It didn't matter how tired I was. It didn't matter how much I hurt. I refused to let them take my soul. One of the hardest moments came during a brutal exercise where we had to carry a heavy log as a team. It was a test of endurance, but it was also a test of mental strength. The log was heavy, and my arms were already sore from hours of training. We had to keep it moving no matter what. We were forced to work as a team, but it felt like we were getting nowhere. Every step was agony. The instructors pushed us harder and harder, yelling at us when we slowed down, telling us we were weak. I could feel the weight of the log dragging me down, and I wanted to quit so badly. But then I remembered why I was here. I wasn't just here to prove I could be tough. I was here to prove that no one could break me. I pushed through the pain. I found a way to dig deeper, to tap into something I didn't even know I had. I kept telling myself, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to let them take my soul. We finished the exercise, and though I was physically destroyed, something had changed inside me. I had faced the worst pain of my life, but I had refused to give up. I had taken my own soul back, and no one could take it from me again. In that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about being willing to endure, to keep going when every part of you wants to quit. And I had learned that I had the power to endure. Chapter 5, Armored. The toughest challenge in SEAL training wasn't the physical pain, it was the mental battle. Every day, the instructors pushed us past our limits, but it was our minds that were the real enemy. I quickly realized that the ones who succeeded weren't just the strongest or the fastest, they were the ones who could control their minds. Our minds are naturally weak. When things get tough, the mind wants to quit. It tells you to stop, to give up, to take the easy way out. It's not just physical pain that holds you back, it's the mental struggle. If I let my mind take control, I would never make it. So I had to learn how to fight back. I had to train my mind just like I trained my body. I started working on mental toughness. When my body was screaming to stop, I would focus on pushing through. I would repeat to myself, pain is temporary, quitting lasts forever. I learned that if I could control my mind, nothing else mattered. One of the hardest challenges I faced was Hell Week, a grueling 5-day test that pushed you to your absolute limits. You're kept awake for days, forced to endure extreme physical exhaustion and put through constant mental pressure. The instructors made sure you felt like giving up. I was freezing cold, soaked from the ocean, and my body was beyond tired. My muscles burned with every movement, and all I wanted to do was sleep. But in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about my body, it was about my mind. I could have quit, but I wasn't going to. I told myself, if I survive this, nothing can stop me. I made a choice to face the pain instead of running from it. I stopped seeing pain as an enemy. I started using it as fuel. The more I accepted the discomfort, the less it controlled me. Slowly, I built an armored mind. Every time I faced pain, I told myself, this is temporary. I am stronger than this. By the end of Hell Week, my body was destroyed, but my mind was stronger than ever. I had learned that mental strength wasn't about ignoring pain or pretending it didn't hurt. It was about using that pain to become stronger. It was about refusing to let fear or discomfort control me. The real lesson I took from this was that the body has limits, but the mind has none. Once you learn to control your mind, nothing can stop you. Every obstacle becomes something to overcome. Every challenge becomes a chance to grow stronger. An armored mind is the key to conquering anything in life. Chapter 6. It's not about a trophy. When I first began my journey toward becoming a Navy SEAL, I was obsessed with the idea of earning the trident, the coveted symbol that meant you had made it. I thought that once I had that trident, I would have proof of my success. It would be the tangible reward for all the hard work, pain, and sacrifice. I imagined that once I wore that badge, I would feel complete, like I had conquered everything. But the longer I trained, the more I realized something critical. The trident wasn't the real prize. I had been focused on the external reward, on the idea of achieving something that others could see and admire. But as I pushed myself through each grueling day, I began to understand that the real reward wasn't something physical. It was the internal growth I was experiencing. The process of training, the challenges, the struggles, and even the pain were shaping me into something stronger than I ever thought I could be. I started to realize that the trident, the trophy, was just a symbol. The real victory was found in the transformation that happened inside me every single day. In training, I learned that the most important thing wasn't proving myself to others, it was proving something to myself. It wasn't about getting a badge or a piece of metal to wear on my chest. It was about learning to overcome the hardest battles, the ones inside my head. It was about growing stronger mentally, physically, and emotionally. As time went on, I saw many others who were chasing the trophy without understanding what it truly meant. They started out with the dream of becoming a SEAL, but when the pain hit, when the instructors pushed them to their limits, they couldn't handle it. They wanted the reward without the sacrifice. They didn't realize that the real challenge wasn't about earning the badge at the end. It was about becoming a person who could endure, who could fight through the discomfort, the fear, and the exhaustion. The instructors didn't care about the trident. They didn't care if we got to wear the badge. What they cared about was seeing who we were when no one was watching, when everything was on the line. They wanted to know if we had the heart to keep going, up, even when it felt impossible. The true goal of training wasn't the trident, it was about who we became in the process. When I finally made it through and earned the right to wear the SEAL trident, it felt different than I expected. Yes, it was a moment of pride, but it wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about gaining recognition or admiration. What mattered was the journey I had gone through to get there. The trident represented more than just a title, it symbolized everything I had overcome. It was proof that I had been tested, I had struggled, and I had pushed myself beyond what I thought I was capable of. But even then, I knew the trident wasn't the true prize. The real victory was in knowing that I had stayed true to myself, that I had kept going even when it seemed impossible. It was the strength I had built, the mental toughness I had developed, and the resilience I now carried with me. The journey had transformed me into someone stronger and more capable than I had ever been before. In the end, it's not about the trophy or the title. It's about the person you become in the pursuit of something greater than yourself. The real prize is found in the challenges you face, the growth you experience, and the mindset you develop. The trident was just a symbol of all of that, of everything I had learned, everything I had endured, and everything I had become. That in itself was the greatest reward. Chapter 7, the most powerful weapon. Throughout my journey, I learned that the most powerful weapon I had was not my physical strength nor my endurance, but my mind. It took me a long time to realize that no matter how tough your body is, it will only take you so far. It's your mind that determines how far you can go, how much you can endure, and whether you succeed or fail. The mental game is everything. I learned this lesson during some of the hardest moments of my training. It wasn't just about surviving the grueling physical exercises, it was about surviving the mental warfare. The trainers would break us down, push us to our limits, and try to find the cracks in our armor. And the truth was, there were plenty of cracks. The mind is full of doubts. It whispers that you're not strong enough, that you'll never make it, that you should quit. And when you're exhausted, when your body is breaking down, that voice is the loudest. But here's the thing, the voice of doubt doesn't go away. It's always there. The challenge is learning to ignore it. The moment you give in to that voice, you lose. I learned that the key was to take control of my thoughts, to shut down the negativity. I had to train my mind the same way I trained my body. The more I learned to block out fear and doubt, the stronger my mind became. I realized that every time I chose not to listen to that voice, I was building something inside me, something that no one could take away. There was a moment in training when I was pushed to my breaking point. We had been through hours of exhausting physical drills, and my body was telling me to quit. I could feel my muscles giving out, and every part of me wanted to stop. I was mentally drained and I started to doubt myself. That was when I realized just how powerful my mind was. It wasn't just about forcing my body to move, it was about forcing my mind to stay strong. The instructors knew this. They knew the mind is what holds people back. That's why they pushed us so hard, tried to break us mentally. They wanted to see if we had what it took to overcome ourselves. It wasn't about the physical challenges. They knew we could all push through physical pain. What they wanted to know was whether we could keep going when the pain was more than physical. They wanted to know if we could keep moving when everything inside us was telling us to stop. This was when I truly understood that the mind is the most powerful weapon. I could be physically broken, but as long as I had control over my mind, I could keep going. Every step, every push up, every swim, I learned to use my mind to push past the limits of my body. And that made me unstoppable. By the end of training, I had developed a mental toughness that I never knew was possible. My body had been broken down, but my mind had been forged into something stronger. I had learned that the real battles weren't won in the gym or in the field. They were won in the mind. The most powerful weapon I had was my ability to keep going, to keep fighting, no matter how hard things got. That weapon, the mind, was something I would carry with me for the rest of my life, and it would be the one thing that no one could ever take away from me. Chapter 8: Talent Not Required. When I started training, I had a mindset that talent was what separated the successful from the unsuccessful. I thought the strongest, the most naturally gifted, were the ones who would make it through. But as I continued pushing myself in SEAL training, I realized something important. Talent wasn't what mattered. What truly mattered was persistence and determination. Talent is a great asset, but it can only take you so far. There will always be someone who's stronger, faster, or smarter. But the one thing you have control over is how hard you're willing to work. You can't always control your natural abilities, but you can control your effort. That's when I understood that it wasn't about being the most talented, it was about being the most relentless. The instructors were not looking for the fastest or the most gifted. They were looking for those who could endure. Talent alone wouldn't get you through the brutal training. It was the people who refused to quit, the ones who pushed through when their bodies were exhausted and their minds were telling them to stop, who made it. I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the strongest, but I refused to quit. In the beginning, I was just like everyone else, struggling, exhausted, and questioning whether I could make it. But I made a decision early on. I would never give up. I knew that if I kept pushing, if I kept going, even when it felt impossible, I would eventually get through it. One of the most important lessons I learned in SEAL training was that talent doesn't guarantee success. It's the people who have the heart, the grit, and the determination to keep going despite the odds who succeed. Every day, I showed up with the mindset that I didn't need to be the best. I just needed to keep going when others gave up. There were times when I thought about quitting, when the pain was unbearable, and my body was on the verge of shutting down. But it wasn't talent that got me through those moments. It was the mental toughness to keep going, the refusal to listen to the voice in my head telling me to stop. Talent didn't matter in those moments. It was about the decision to keep fighting. As I continued training, I saw the same pattern. The ones who had natural talent often burned out. They relied on their abilities and didn't push through the mental battles. The ones who didn't have the same level of talent, the ones who struggled every step of the way, were the ones who stuck it out. They kept coming back, no matter how hard it got. At the end of it all, I realized that talent wasn't required to succeed. What mattered was the drive to keep pushing forward, to keep improving, and to never quit. That mindset was what got me through training, and it's what's helped me succeed in every area of life since then. In the end, talent will only take you so far, but with determination, persistence, and a refusal to quit, you can accomplish things that seem impossible. It's not about being the most talented, it's about being the most relentless. Chapter 9: Uncommon Amongst Uncommon. By the time I made it to SEAL training, I had already been through a lot. I thought I knew what hard was, but nothing could have prepared me for the intensity of the training. The Navy SEALs are already an elite group, but the true test is to stand out even among them. I learned quickly that in order to make it, I had to be uncommon amongst uncommon. Everyone who made it to SEAL training had already proven themselves. We were all the best of the best. athletes, soldiers, and competitors who had excelled in different areas. But just being good wasn't enough. In this world, you had to be exceptional. You had to be able to handle the mental and physical challenges that most people wouldn't even dare to face. The SEALs had a reputation for toughness, but within that toughness, there was a higher level that few people reached. The men who stood out, who made a difference, were those who didn't just follow the rules or meet the minimum standards. They went beyond. They pushed themselves harder, farther, and longer than anyone else. They didn't just survive, they thrived. They were uncommon among the already uncommon. I started to understand that it wasn't enough to simply survive training. Anyone can endure pain for a little while, but the real challenge is how you handle it when you're in the depths of exhaustion, when everything hurts, when every part of you is screaming to stop. The difference between those who make it and those who don't isn't just physical ability, it's the ability to keep going when it seems like you can't. The instructors knew this, and they were experts at identifying who had the mental toughness to be great. They could tell who was merely enduring and who was pushing to the next level. The ones who stood out were the ones who didn't let their circumstances define them. They took everything to heart. They became leaders. They gave 110%, no matter how hard things got. They weren't satisfied with being average in a world that demands excellence. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that even if you're already among the best, you have to keep pushing to be better. Being great isn't enough when you're surrounded by greatness. You have to continue to break your limits, to go beyond what you think is possible. The standards of excellence in SEAL training were sky high, and you had to raise your game to meet them, not just once, but every single day. There were days when I wanted to quit. I was tired, my body was broken, and the obstacles seemed impossible. But I knew that if I gave up, I would just be like everyone else, good but not great. So I kept pushing. I embraced the challenges, pushed through the pain, and refused to settle for being ordinary. I understood that to truly stand out in the world of the SEALs, I had to be uncommon, even among the already uncommon. I learned that greatness isn't just about being good at what you do, it's about pushing past the point where others stop. It's about being mentally and physically strong, and it's about constantly striving to improve, even when you've already achieved so much. It's about showing up every day with the mindset that you can always do better. The best of the best don't rest on their laurels, they push to go further than they've gone before. In the world of the SEALs, you're constantly tested, and the bar is always set higher. To be uncommon amongst the uncommon means you can't afford to coast. You have to push yourself beyond what you thought was possible, even when everyone else is already giving everything they have. That's how you stand out, and that's how you truly become a SEAL. Chapter 10: The Empowerment of Failure. Failure is something that most people fear, something they try to avoid at all costs. But in the world of SEAL training, failure was something I had to embrace. It was inevitable, and more importantly, it was necessary. I learned that failure wasn't something to be ashamed of. Instead, it was a powerful tool for growth and transformation. Throughout training, I failed over and over again. Whether it was failing a physical test, making a mistake during a mission, or not meeting the high standards set for us, failure seemed to be a constant companion. At first, it was tough to accept. I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be the best right from the start. But I soon realized that failure wasn't the end of the road. It was just a lesson, a stepping stone on the path to improvement. Every failure was an opportunity to learn. It taught me what I was doing wrong, where I needed to improve, and how I could push myself further. Instead of letting failure defeat me, I used it to fuel my determination. Each time I failed, I got back up and tried again with more knowledge, more grit, and a deeper understanding of myself. The most powerful thing about failure is how it strips away the illusion of perfection. It humbles you, forces you to confront your weaknesses, and challenges you to grow. In SEAL training, failure was a mirror. It showed me exactly where I stood, what I needed to work on, and where I was limiting myself. But it also gave me the opportunity to correct my mistakes and come back stronger. As I failed and got back up again, I began to see failure differently. Instead of dreading it, I started to welcome it as part of the process. Every time I failed, I learned something new. I learned to be more resilient, to work harder, and to be more strategic. I learned to embrace discomfort and to grow from it. One of the key lessons I learned was that failure doesn't define you. It's how you respond to failure that truly matters. Some of the men I trained with failed over and over, but they didn't let it break them. They used each failure as a way to strengthen their resolve. They didn't quit, and eventually they succeeded because they refused to let failure have the final say. Failure became my greatest teacher. It taught me that perfection is not the goal, progress is. Each time I stumbled, I found a way to get back on track, and each time I was a little better. The more I accepted failure, the more I grew. In life, failure is inevitable. Everyone faces it at some point, but it's not about avoiding failure, it's about how you handle it. Do you let it defeat you, or do you use it to push yourself forward? Failure isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace because it empowers you. It forces you to dig deeper, become better, and to push past your limits. Looking back on my training and all the failures I faced, I realized that each failure was an essential part of my success. Without failure, I would never have grown. Without failure, I would never have become the person I am today. And that's the true empowerment of failure. It doesn't break you, it builds you. Chapter 11. What if? The phrase what if is something that can either paralyze you with doubt or drive you toward your goals. In SEAL training, we were constantly faced with that question. What if I can't do this? What if I fail? But over time, I realized that the real power of what if comes from flipping it on its head. Instead of asking, what if I can't do something, I started asking myself, what if I can? The fear of failure is natural. Everyone has moments when doubt creeps in. It's easy to get caught up in all the possible ways things could go wrong, to imagine the worst case scenarios. But if you allow yourself to only see the negative outcomes, you'll never take the chance to find out what you're truly capable of. In training, there were many moments when I had to ask myself, what if I can't make it? When the physical exhaustion hit, when the mental fatigue set in, when it felt like everything was crashing down, that question loomed large. But instead of letting it control me, I flipped it. I asked, what if I push through this? What if I find a way to succeed despite all the odds? That simple shift in mindset made all the difference. Every time I faced a tough challenge, instead of focusing on the possibility of failure, I focused on the potential for success. I started to see that what if wasn't a question of fear, it was a question of possibility. What if I could go farther than I thought? What if I could break through the wall in front of me? This change in perspective was crucial. It's easy to get stuck in the what ifs that hold you back, the ones that keep you from even trying. But when you embrace the possibility of success, you unlock a new level of motivation. It pushes you to take action, to keep moving forward, to not let fear dictate your path. There were times when it seemed impossible to keep going, when the pain was overwhelming, when the odds were stacked against me, when everyone around me seemed to be quitting. But instead of succumbing to the question of, what if I fail? I focused on the question, what if I succeed? And that gave me the strength to keep going. The power of what if isn't about avoiding failure. It's about believing in your ability to rise above it. It's about giving yourself the chance to succeed by taking action instead of letting fear stop you. Every time you ask yourself what if and choose to keep going, you're building your resilience, your strength, and your belief in what's possible. In life, we're all going to face challenges, doubts, and fears. The key is not to let those fears define us. Instead of asking, what if I fail? We need to ask, what if I succeed? And then take the steps to make that success a reality. By changing the way we view what if, we can transform the way we approach challenges. We stop focusing on the negative outcomes and start focusing on the possibilities. And that mindset is what makes all the difference. When you ask, what if I can, and believe that you can, you open up a world of potential and start unlocking your true power.